Thank you very much. Hello, Jason. How are you
Hello.
this morning?
I'm
Let's
really, really well,
pretend
thank
it's
you.
let's pretend it's the first time that we've spoken.
Yeah,
Anyway,
that's a
we're going to talk about how you're going to take voice to the next level, aren't we? But before we begin, for those that don't know Jason, do you want to give us a little bit of an introduction about yourself?
yeah, absolutely. So my name is Jason Wynn. I am a Microsoft MPP specializing in voice and video collaboration. Been doing it now kind of since in anger since 2007. But I've been doing a lot of video conferencing and such, well beyond before all those things. How about you, Steve? Where do you sit in the UC space, and how long have you been doing it for?
I've been doing it for too long. Now, well, one thing on your side, you met Harrison Ford, which always seems to be your introduction. And I was going to put in mine, did not meet Harrison Ford and has not met Harrison Ford. But unfortunately, longer than I think. And I've always been more focused on the collaboration side. And the weird thing, one thing that you might not know if you know me and Jason have listened to our podcast is my dad did voice and Jason's dad did exchange. So we both wanted to do the opposite of that, which means that we don't actually overlap too much on some of the stuff that we do together. But I've been an MVP now for 10 years. I work at content and cloud. I'm in an actual office, which is kind of weird. As we move to our big new offices, it's kind of empty in here as well. Spooky. But when I'm not working at Content and Cloud, I write for Practical 365. I do the podcast with Jason, all about 365, and the Practical 365 podcast with Paul Robershaw as well. And occasionally speak at conferences, write books and articles on stuff as well. So let's get started with our agenda for the session. For we're going to take you through over the next 41 minutes, I think.
Yeah. So we'll be kicking things off. A really brief overview of how Teams works and how Teams works as a phone system. Break things down to its subcomponents, where we have calling plans, direct routing, Operator Connect, some of the new features that have come out in the circa end of last year. And then we'll hand over then to Steve, and Steve will go through. Go ahead, you want to talk through those points you're on?
Yeah, absolutely. So going to get deep into some of the useful options that you've got with devices. Not going to be talking too much about what makes up the modern hybrid meeting space, because this is about voice, right? So it'll all make sense as to why we're talking about that as well. But there's some modern options as well that we need to talk about, bringing things together and thinking about what you should be aiming for, rather than just meeting some of those more traditional needs that you've got. So some of the most newest and cutting edge devices, stuff that's only become really a reality this week with launches at Enterprise Connect as such, for those actually at a real conference in person over in Orlando. Wow. There's actual kit here or kit over there that does really change the way that you might be doing things when you're thinking about how you're going to do voice in Teams, how you're going to kit out offices with hot desking areas and so on. So we'll get into that in the second half of the session. But first, we need to start with a baseline, don't we? Because you might not be an expert in voice yet. So whilst I'm sure everybody knows what Teams is, you're using it now. Jason, do you want to give us that baseline for how we're going to get to that base level of knowledge of Teams voice, how it all plugs together, what it connects to, why Teams is a platform?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we take things where root level around Teams, we know that we're able to communicate through Teams. We know that we have integration into how we collaborate, and we bring all that together, how we work on files and such between things. And then obviously within that, we can extend things out even further, so that way we can allow us to bring in applications or our own applications, bespoke applications within it. In addition to that, we can tie things into making sure we have compliance within that. And those same things and the same rules and the same precedents that we follow within all those faucets between communicate, collaborate, applications, and being able to pull those things in together, and obviously governance within it ties into the voice as well. And I've left this slide in because Steve asked me, why do we want this slide? And I said, the reason we want to have this next slide around applications of where you can join from is that the seamless answer is that we have the same code up to like 98% the same between all facets of how you can join a meeting or make a telephone call, and it's the same. So the same experience you have on your iOS device is the same as what you would have on any of the latest Windows builds, latest OS X, and able to join from a Chromium browser. So that the interface and how you look and how you feel and the compatibility between all of it is exactly the same. And remember, one of the key points within this is that Microsoft own the whole piece, and that's what's really, really nice, is that it's driven from the client and works with the Microsoft backend infrastructure to be able to provide that service. And as we go through it, you'll see it more and more and more. But obviously now I have the ability to grab a phone call and transfer it to a new meeting. And as I was trying to join this meeting, it's quite funny. It was calling me and dragging me in, and it's trying to grab me. My mobile phone was ringing, and all the devices were calling in. And the nice thing about that is I could have joined from anywhere. Now, obviously, I want to have the ability to have a 4K camera, and I want to have the ability to be able to present myself in the best light we could. But I could have joined from anywhere, and that's the nice thing about being able to pull that all in is that I could join from any of these devices and have a very similar experience. So what is voice? So voice matters within things. So we're able to see how we join into these different conversations, and we're able to pull these things together, and we can ultimately build a better connection with all of our end users within it. And we can understand that things are working remotely, and they're able to bring things together as a single interface of what we're trying to do. But if we look at how old telephony used to work and how we're trying to build things out, and we take a look at how things used to be. Now, this is an old Meridian system that we used to have at BT side of things, but that was what we would have, is something that looked like a half a rack deep size solution. And sometimes there were, one unit or 2 units or 3 units, as we can see here. And we would have a physical handset, and we'd have to cable that thing in. And then that went into a rack, into a patch paneling, and you have to use a punch down tool, and it would go in, and it was messy, it was time consuming. And then that gave us telephone. That gave us the ability to pick up the handset and make a phone call out. But life didn't stop there. I mean, life evolves on.
That was good though. There was
there
was a time when that was like the cutting edge, like in the 90s.
Yeah.
This is why I didn't go down this route deep into voice like you just, because I remember sitting there as a small child, and it was what you've got in one of those units took up a whole building, at one point. Oh, and that's only thinking back to like the 80s as well.
Yeah.
So the patch panel's probably taking up the most amount of space, but things have come a long way very, very quickly.
And it was super antiquated really quick. But like you said, but as we moved into VoIP infrastructure and we start moving away from what we had as an old technology, we didn't want just to have a telephone service. We wanted a single service provider. We want to be able to bring in PSTN conferencing into it, like a web-based conferencing that we're doing now. Messaging, instant messaging, IMMP, be able to have the same support, maintenance on the things, a high availability. Like Teams Voice is now 99.99%.
According to Daniel, he was looking after that until 3 months ago. And my gosh.
I do feel for that. Is absolutely ludicrous that in this day and age we still have the ability to requiring some sort of punching down to get into telephone systems. And as we tie into things as well, we've got obviously that ties into the voicemail aspects, whether it resides on Exchange, on-prem or online, and how we tie into contact centers. And obviously there's a myriad of contact centers that are coming out that are being certified each and every day. But so where does this take us, and where do we see things moving to? And the key thing here is that things are definitely moving to hybrid. So Steve is working out of the office today. I'm not sure if he sat quite like that chap on the left with the little IKEA pull-up table with a lounge. All that, yeah, exactly.
I'm just chilling here in the office, and it's not all it's cracked up to be.
No,
that's for sure.
And we have the ability now to work regardless of where we're physically sat, and where we're physically sat doesn't necessarily impact on how what we're doing. And what we're seeing is the ability to take those conversations that we're having and have them everywhere. And Steve's got some really cool equipment that I think he's going to be talking about later on, where it identifies who you are or where you are and make things really, really unique. And we're going to see parity between working on a hybrid environment and working in the office and working at home, and everybody has the same equal say. So modern communications is bringing up to that, being able to evolve those conversations. And obviously what we're overall trying to do and to help people have that return on investment is bringing down the budgets as and when it's applicable to do so. So circa this end of last month, we're now looking at 1 billion phone calls made. So that's 1 billion phone calls in a month. So that's not bad going, really. And we're seeing that grow even further and further now, where we're seeing 250 million active users. What 80 million telephone active users each and obviously each month, and 1 billion phone calls. And on top of that, we're the kind of push on the sales piece, and the Microsoft's trying to say, and independent ways of doing it is that they brought in the likes of Gartner, they brought in the likes of Forrester, and they're saying, look, where do we sit? And for the third year running, we're seeing that on the Gartner side of things, they're still in the leaderboard for UC as a service, and likewise, same thing with Forrester as well. So this is where they sit as UC as a service, and hopefully that comes through okay. So we've taken and obviously still sat in the upper right hand quadrant, still leader of what they do, still pushing massively what they do. And if you wanted to grab those URLs on the left hand side, where the Gartner pulls through and they tell you where does it sit and why do they sit that way and what's big and what's important from them going forward, and how does that actually tie into things, and it's obviously key. And here's the Forrester review for it. And obviously what they're trying to say here is it's a massive piece of engineering to be able to have your phone calls come through Teams. And the reason why that is it saves on average 1.25 hours per week. That's a lot of loss of faffing. And that's probably something that I'm not sure if it's a British terminology or not, but a lot less messing about. A single pane of glass, I can have my phone calls, have my contacts, everything's done, everything's backed up, highly available, and it makes a really simple solution for my end users to be able to do so.
So backup is obviously one of those things where that's a dangerous topic in Microsoft 365. The backup is that high availability, isn't it? It's less about the how you store the data, which is obviously a completely different conversation. But there's that build out of services in Azure where effectively, if it breaks, then you connect to another. We had a weird thing where we started a Teams meeting. Never happened to me before, but everyone who joined, bad quality, and sort that out later. But everyone left the meeting, started the meeting again, and it connected to a different part of the service, and all was good. And it's that sort of backup where if something breaks, then there's always something else there. In the old days, if you all joined a meeting and things were wrong, or started a call and there was consistently problems in that sort of way, then what would you do? This would be a service desk call. This would be, if you're on-prem using Cisco, you'd have to fail over call manager or something like that, or live with it for the rest of the afternoon until you could actually get around to solving it at a down period. For anybody these days, the backup is just go in again, and it works. Switch it off and switch it on again from the client side.
How do we access Teams as a phone system? And what ultimately what it does, when we apply that Microsoft phone system license, and we'll touch on what license and such we need in a moment, but we apply the license and we basically spin up that functionality, we then have that Teams calling button. And that button allows us to make and receive phone calls. So that's where we triage the calls to come in and basically give us the easy access to dial tone. And we were talking about before, I think it was a previous podcast, Steve, where like Teams and phone and having the ability to have a phone, people don't like panic because people always expect to have that telephone dial tone service. Whereas if we have emails and we don't receive emails for, I don't know, 20 minutes, half an hour, people don't realize it. But the criteria, the criticality of what we put around calling is different. Like it's super important to us to be able to make and receive those phone calls. So Microsoft bring that to the forefront, make it really easy for us to have that functionality.
Yeah, and I think 20 minutes for some people could be a bad thing with email, but it is that dial tone. If it doesn't work, they might want to scrap the entire system. If you try and open an email, it takes 3 seconds once, then people will live with that. You know, it's that criticality where you just expect it to always work. You know, it's almost like, you know, a nuclear bomb or something like that had gone off where you wouldn't expect to get dial tone. All right, time to be going on about stuff like that, to be fair.
But yeah, the
4 weeks
criticality is
ago,
there.
that'd be the most unusual situation ever to suggest. But you always expect it, right? Don't you? And that's what customers have said to me. You know, we don't mind a little bit of latency occasionally. We understand that can happen with other bits of the service, but if the CFO or the CEO goes into a meeting room, picks up a phone, he expects to, or she expects to get a dial tone.
Yeah, it has to have happened. So I attended Tom's session earlier, and he touched on a lot of these things as well. But so what do we do around how do we get voice out of the platform itself? And the easy way of explaining it is you can buy your own service through Microsoft, bring those calling plans in. This all sits underneath that Microsoft phone system add-in. And then, with addition to that, if you want to bring your own service from your incumbent provider, you would utilize something like Operator Connect that ties into. There's a dozen different operators now that have that service, or you could do something called direct routing, where you bring your own SBC into it, or you bring SBC as a service and be able to bring all that functionality into it.
So the Teams phone system part, then that's like that Meridian system. It's not connected to it. If it's got not got any connections to anything, which for the Meridian system, what would be, you know, ISDN 30s or something like that, then it doesn't work. But it's the PBX bit. It's the bit that gives you the dial tone. You can't necessarily call anywhere without all those add-ons.
And it's a key point to bring out. So say if we have that old Meridian system, and what do we need to do about integrating it in? We could do that direct routing solution where we have our SBC or session border controller on-prem, and it would allow us to tie into that and have analog circuitry in and out and all sorts. So there's loads of ways we could do these things of bringing in different technologies into it, and we'll touch on all that in just a moment. But yeah, we're working through the process. So call management, all of it's done through Microsoft Teams, through the Teams Admin Center. Obviously, what they're trying to do is simplify things drastically, being able to make things really, really simple for our users and our end users to make and receive phone calls, but even simpler for our Teams admins to be able to control, maintain it, and control those policies that we may or may not want to make people call, or telephone assignment, and those type of things we can all do through a single pane within the Microsoft Teams Admin Center. Call quality dashboard is where we go to where we want to see a holistic view of how our overall organization's doing. So we can look into and understand how our calls are flowing and how they're working, or are we having a particular outage on a particular network, or is the subnet working or not working? In addition to that, call quality dashboard gives us the ability to tie into the understanding of what your physical hardware is doing. So we can put our own desktop device infrastructure information inside it, and it will look through and it can tell you whether or not a particular type of laptop, we're using a particular type of driver for its audio drivers or web Wi-Fi or anything else within it, to bring it all in, to make it super simple for us to understand that voice quality is paramount to Microsoft, and how we triage that as a holistically as an organization makes it simpler and more obvious for us to be able to triage these things.
So I know we've got quite a lot to go through in a session, and we're gonna be getting on to more stuff soon. But the core quality dashboard part, that, you know, how critical is that? You know, if you've deployed Teams Voice in any sort of way, how critical is it that you use that to be more proactive?
It gives us a good viewpoint from a historical viewpoint, how things are working. So if I wanted to understand how things are in flight, I would use the Teams Admin Center, and I can look into and I can actually see call flows that are ongoing right that very minute. Whereas if I wanted to go back and see how many calls did we have in the month of December or November or October, and I can go through and find out how many we've had, and it gives me a really good understanding of how the status of what the phone system is as an organization. So it is, for me, it's paramount. If I'm a business admin or IT admin and I'm trying to understand how good or how poorly my telephone system's working, I can go to that one stop, see how it's going. I can see how many good calls, bad calls, poor calls we're having, how many reporting back. Do we have any infrastructure problems? Is my firewalls blocking any ports? I could do all that through the Teams admin center to be able to kind of triage all of that.
Okay, so you get a call, and it's the second one this week saying, I'm getting calls dropped occasionally, and you think, is this just coincidence, or is there a bigger problem? You do the troubleshooting in the Teams admin center. If you see a couple of things that worry you, this is where you'd look to see whether has this been going on for weeks and I just didn't know this, or is there a wider problem? And you get that view. So it's crucial, but it is historical data then.
So to go through, we've now got this slide I need to update. I haven't updated it yet, but now we've got calling plans on the right-hand side, which is now available in 31 different markets. So we'll go through all these things. Likewise, we have Operator Connect and direct routing. So kind of break these things down, and not necessarily the minutiae detail, but more depth. We've grown and grown and grown, and we're now able to provide these services to a vast swathe of organizations and outside. So we can now bring our services into Microsoft as our calling partner, and that's the key point within it. And to keep things super simple, they're basically managed and maintained by Microsoft. They allow us to have the cheers, Alexander. I recognize that name, sir. How are you? It's good to grab the old domestic and international side of things into it. And obviously, there's new markets being brought in, and there's lots of Eastern European countries that are just brought in very, very recently. And again, I've got a list of those. But what do we need? Being able to provide the standalone voice offering within it. It simply is, for a voice perspective, is we've got, for the phone system is about $8, and that provides the phone system itself, the PBX infrastructure. And if you wanted to be able to provide the telco, the actual calling plans from Microsoft, it's circa $12 per month. And again, that's available for over 70 countries to be able to receive those phone calls in. It's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek to say that you can provide a whole service through, because right now it's just 31 countries. If you want to look at how the phone plans work and the calling plans work, they're broken down like this. So it has the ability to provide those pools. Now, the good thing about this is the calling plans are pooled across the organization per geography, per pool of license. So if you have 10 people who are using 1,200 minutes, well, obviously then you've got 12,000 minutes because it's pooled across as 10 people, and it's grouped together like that. So it's a good idea to use the call quality dashboard, and it's also a good idea to understand how many lines of minutes you're using and validating that you're not oversubscribed. So there's actual places where we can have coverage now for calling plans. This is grand list now that we're pulling all this technology through. Here's kind of a map view of what we're looking at this moment in time. So new markets, as you can see, we've got quite a significant growth within kind of Southern and Eastern Europe now that are inside the Microsoft calling plans.
And just because we made all this effort to double check this, Mark, there's a lot of articles in the computer press over the last few years saying Microsoft are launching into all these other markets for calling plans. And then we downloaded the CSV file to get the current list, and then we saw all the drop-down lists with everything, and then about tens and tens of pages. We validated that actually the CSV file you get from Microsoft Docs matches where calling plans are actually available.
Alexander would have been really, really proud with the amount of scripting you put into this to validate it.
I cloned the Git repo for all the Teams documentation, then grepped through all the pages to just do that very, very quickly. Because there's a long list here. How are we going to go through all this to validate it the other day? But that's that list is correct as of today. Where there's other markets where other things are available, like conferencing and stuff, but calling plans, it's still quite a shorter list compared to the wider list of where Teams voice services are available of other sorts.
And I've seen in the chat that people are talking about the Power BI. I've had mixed reviews with the Power BI stuff where we were using the Graph API and the actual templates from Microsoft, and it was a bit of the information wasn't matching what we saw in reality. So I would take everything with a bit of salt with that to validate the amount what you're getting out of the Graph API and out of Power BI to grab what we're having within Teams. So yes, those functionalities there, and you can grab that, but we can. I would have to validate that without what's going on with South Africa. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen proposed, but I do believe it was being pulled into a. It's been tapped.
And with Operator Connect, there's just a question that's came through. Now, we did, between me, you and Tom, we did the course recently, so we just spent a lot of time making sure the licensing stuff was right, because it was Microsoft's course that you pass an exam on. Now, I didn't write that bit of the course, but my understanding is if you use Operator Connect, you don't need calling plans. But
correct.
Someone's saying they've been told with one Operator Connect company that they've got to buy both.
No.
That makes no sense. That the whole point of Operator Connect is to give you that choice into not just markets but also cost as well.
Mm-hmm.
If you're double buying, that that doesn't sound like they're saying the right thing. Because
so when you ingest, what happens with Operator Connect, and even with the new version of what's going on with mobile, you're bringing those carriers into it. So there's still your carrier to be able to do that.
And effectively, at a very, very simplistic level, it is like using direct routing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, but you don't have to worry about the SBC at all. So the Operator Connect brings it all in. The SBC is being managed. Whereas if you think like this right here with the slide we're on now, we may have the certified SBC in place. We have our telephone numbers and bring all these things in. But in reality, we could host that SBC. What's certified is the session border controller and not the people solution. So it's not like our solution is certified. We're just utilizing a session border controller that's certified. Some key points around direct routing that are relevant here is SBCs gives us more flexibility. We could tie into telephone systems. So we talked about Meridian a second ago. You know what? If we had an ability to do that or requirement to do that, we could potentially do that at that point. If we have a requirement to tie this into a contact center or a third-party application, we could do that with the SBC. And obviously, we can't do that through Operator Connect. We can't do that through calling plans if we're using it natively, unless we're using something that bolts in, in some sort of a unique way to be able to do so. But if we have our own functionality, a third-party application we tie things into, absolutely we would utilize direct routing to get that done. Another component that's coming in that's certified is the SBA, or Survivable Branch Appliance, and that allows us to have offline component. And what happens then is we get a token. And as a 24-hour token, it allows us to sign in. And if we become unattached to Microsoft, then obviously what we could do is utilize that token and then go and validate how we're working within Microsoft Teams to be able to provide a local service and be able to bring those services online for telephone calls. Operator Connect. Operator Connect allows us to tie our functionality into an incumbent provider. Now, we need to make sure that those suppliers are part of the approved list. So basically, it's BYOO, bring your own carrier or your own telephone operator. And then what it allows us to do is tie that whole functionality seamlessly into Teams. So you would use this if you have your incumbent contract has a longer period of time, and it's not cost effective for you to leave that contract and move to Microsoft calling plans, or you haven't got coverage or whatever it may be, and you want to be able to extend that out, but your supplier is on that Operator Connect list, then you would obviously use Operator Connect and then ingest those telephone services into it. Another piece is that we've just seen in the last couple of months is Operator Connect Mobile, and what we have then is be able to make and receive phone calls into it from your telephone provider, who are your mobile phone operator. And
now, I thought this answers a big question that I've heard several times before over probably the last year, where people say, why would I buy Teams Voice if I'm going to give people mobiles anyway?
Yeah.
So that solves that issue. And it also means that if you are going to join, if you're going to join or have a PSTN line assigned, a number assigned to your mobile that you provided by work, then you don't end up with two numbers. And you've also got some control over, or the operator has some control over that end-to-end connectivity too, because often people will buy a contract for their SIMs with one provider, and then they might go to a different provider for voice. Now, this ties that together, so that provider is saying, right, well, I'm giving the connectivity to the SIM card and the number to the SIM card, and that does mean that effectively that even though it's a PSTN call and you switch over to Teams, they're in control of that whole route. The other scenario without this mobile would be effectively that you're signing into Teams and the call quality is based on your 4G connectivity, and it would be down to the user, for example, to then go change their configuration if they had bad connectivity in Teams, so it used less bandwidth for voice, and that's not an easy thing to do, and it's not an easy thing to troubleshoot. So it does seem to fit a purpose. I do feel like it's going to take some time to sit in the market. So when I have a chance to have some hands-on and see how call handoff works as you move from desk to mobile, or mobile to desk and vice versa works, because it is more than just dual ring from the provider side. There's some close integrations with Teams with those providers, which is quite interesting, to be honest.
Totally. So what we're going to see, some of these the list of providers spin up first, and then reality says by the end of the year we'll have more and more on. But right now, obviously, there's no GA date of when this is going to be provided. So core functionality that's been brought into Microsoft Teams in the last couple of months and shipped in 2020 and 2021 is obviously these key components. And it's been growing and growing and growing. And that's the lovely thing about Microsoft Teams as a phone system, is that the services are always being spun up and always new functionality being brought in, and they're all included in your license price and piece of. So I'm going to spin things over to Mr. Goodman now. I'll let him take over the show. But obviously, if you have any questions, drop them into the Teams chat, and we'll go from there.
Yes. So before I move on from your slide, I wanted to pick out a couple of features. That walkie-talkie for desk phones. That is an interesting one to go. So on my YouTube channel, on Practical 365, we took some phones, these ones actually, around a racetrack to use walkie-talkie. Which, when you're thinking about it from the an airport or manufacturing plant, that makes a lot of sense. But that walkie-talkie functionality on a desk phone, people have said, what would I use that for? But there are scenarios. So the PA who's paging into the other room, areas like that might be useful. Not seen any customers using it there yet, so be interested to see whether you've had any experiences with people who need that two-way radio with a phone scenario yourselves. But devices, they still have a role. Desk phones are still something that people need, but it is in a more limited sense. So the mindset really, when you go into Teams Voice, should be using good devices. So Logi kindly sent me this device. The Poly devices are great as well, but a good Teams certified device should be all most people need for making and receiving calls, because they can work with mobiles very well. They can work with your desk machine as well. Even some devices will be supported natively with Windows with Bluetooth. Apparently, sometime this month. Not quite yet on the Teams devices breakdown on the site yet, but Teams devices like headsets always make a lot of sense. And of course, in that contact center scenario where you might have Teams Voice, you're going to be using headsets, wired or otherwise anyway. But there's going to be receptionist phones, so the Teams phones with the bolt-on the side to find the right number. There's going to be common area phone scenarios that you need to meet. There's also going to be, and I've seen this at customers, some of our customers as well, Jason, where they said, look, people are very traditional in what they do, so they do want to have a desk phone. And it might be that actually, whilst Teams is a big collaboration product that you're planning to roll out, if you're doing voice first, then bringing those legacy SIP phones in first before you then roll out Teams widely might be something that you choose to do. Move the voice stuff over. Then when they start using the Teams client, then that's the point that you start ripping out the legacy devices as well. And some of those legacy SIP phones, they're actually common phones that you can get now. You might even choose to use those SIP devices for a longer period of time, because like the one I've got on here, you can still buy those today. Some people may have deployed them with Asterisk or another phone system over the last couple of years before we know. But when you're looking at this, then I'll come to consideration number 2 for the future. But the provisioning process is somewhat different depending on how you've set them up, from a small organization to a larger organization. So hopefully this will start playing for you. Video over PowerPoint Live can be interesting, to say the least. But the provisioning process is one where, if you've got this information up front, or you're getting the devices into a central location to then get the devices, check that they're on the network, then you can make sure that they're pre-provisioned into the tenant. And that is a case of getting the MAC addresses. It's pretty straightforward from this side. Getting the MAC addresses, as you saw, you can grab it from the phone web interface, grab it from the phone itself if needs be, and then you can provision those into your tenant, ready for users to use. This is not quite autopilot for phones, but it's perhaps as close as you'd expect to get, really, in that area, where the phone is going to then provision itself when it starts up into your organization, because often alongside getting Teams phones ready, you're going to be using conditional access policies. You're going to have ways and means that people are going to be able to access this. Now, what you can see on the screen here, this is, I can't remember off the top of my head who wrote this script. It's a PowerShell script, really useful. It connects to the phones and it does a screen capture as you're working on it. But it's very much like when you sign into Netflix or something like that, where you get a code that a user then puts into the browser. So part of the provisioning process here, we've pre-provisioned it into our organization and it launches and it's ready to go in. The user then type that code in to their web browser on their PC and they'll be straight into our organization. So it's a good newer process. They'll get a code that they then pop into this side. Now, that's similar to the normal sign-in process for MTR on Android and Teams phones as well. But the key thing is it's tying it to organization. You know, they can't sign out and then sign in to their own tenant or something like that. Well, it's our phone and we've got control over it. We know it's going to be onboarded the right way. If we send it out to them, wherever it gets Wi-Fi access, then we've got an element of attachment. And then when we're thinking about common area phones and shared devices, then we've got that sign-in process. And I believe it may not have launched yet, but the ability to pre-sign in for a particular user is on the way as well, and that would happen on this screen that you see here, where we've got that final piece of the sign-in process available. So provisioning devices remotely is definitely something that should be on your agenda if you're rolling those out, but think carefully before you roll out. Today's world is different to the old world. You don't necessarily want to roll out the same sort of devices. Now, this is a picture from Yealink at Enterprise Connect yesterday, and these new Teams devices, the Teams displays, this is the 24 from Yealink. I forget the full name of it off the top of my head right now. There's several vendors that are making these, and it seems a bit of a strange concept when you think about it initially, right? You know, I'm in an office at the moment and there's hot desking areas. So you've got a screen, you've got a hub that you plug into. And one thing that I heard as feedback about hot desking areas from another customer was they'd actually bought devices and they wanted to buy headsets and things like that to be able to use. But they didn't want people to share headsets, you know, because of COVID and all that sort of stuff. And this fits that area quite well, where you don't want people to have to bring stuff around with them all the time. And of course, connecting your own device to one of these Teams displays for meetings isn't a particularly bad scenario to do. Or you can have, as many of these have, use the speaker in it as well. In a crowded open plan office, that's a bad idea, right? But it's in smaller places or where there's just somebody on a call, that's not too bad. The really neat thing about these is the idea that they can be used as a hot desk place where you plug your PC into it and start using. So you sit down at the desk, like I did when I came to the office this morning. I used a desk booking app to book a place. You can check into that hot desk from this Teams display, part of the features in that. And you use it as your screen. It's not just some side device. You can use it as your screen with your device, or you can use it just for your meetings and calls and have your laptop aside to it. And I think this is a really good evolution of what the Teams displays were, where originally it was a Teams phone based on that same Android OS, And it went really for that sort of Echo Show type device where it's just the display. Starla Henson has been a big proponent of using these devices so you can see your meeting content. For me, I wasn't really sure about it, but this is not a bad concept if you're looking to build out those hot desking areas, all smaller sort of huddle spaces or pods where you want people to be able to quickly check in, use it. You want to get that visibility for the fact that they're sitting there in that space, and you want to be able to give them the screen. You want to be able to give them good quality video and such when they're in the office as well. So interesting way of doing this. QR code or RF. Yes, so use a password. There's going to be a part to that for logging in. You're going to have your conditional access policies as well, naturally, if they're in your office. I'm just answering the questions coming through from Harold. And it may be that most of the time you just plug in. You plug your device in as you check into that space and use your normal laptop or whatever you brought with you. As things like Windows 365 progress, then you might find that someone will plug in their phone and use remote desktop to connect off that. Maybe we'll even see those in the Teams displays themselves. That could be a neat way that Microsoft could take them in a different direction. No idea whether they will or won't. We'll soon see that. And this one is interesting. If you work for a Microsoft partner, like I do, then you may have concerns or may not have concerns about the idea that your customers can go into the Teams Admin Center and buy devices. But the concept of it itself is something really that I think the market needs. So we talked about like provisioning devices, and that means getting the devices to somewhere and then doing things. Now, this could be something that the vendor does. It could be something that you do as a supplier. The new admin device purchasing option, though, is really neat in that, as I understand it from what Microsoft have said, then they're going to help with the provisioning process. Like, if you buy an Amazon Echo, right? And you say, keep it tied to my account. It arrives, it's all set up for you. Now that's a neat way of being able to order devices. It might cost more than buying them from the cheapest distributor on the market. However, it's a good way of being able to get these out because a lot of that value add Microsoft are adding straight into the service itself. Thankfully, as I understand, it's not for users. They're not going to go in and buy their own devices and charge them to the company through that portal. It is for admins. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk about in the last couple of minutes is meetings. Now, we're not going to talk about what the new hybrid meeting and ways of working are, because I'd expect that if you're if you're watching the other sessions, then you're going to have a lot of options in terms of where different vendors are going, what different people are doing, what people have done on this. But it's the thing to keep in mind, right? It's very easy to think about what your rooms are today, what the requirements are today, especially if you haven't yet started on this journey where you're thinking, right, well, at the moment we've got spider phones, a screen with a HDMI cable, and that spider phone we can dial out and dial into a meeting. And if we went back a few years, if I went back 3 years, then we were starting to show people what Teams was and not what video calling was, but the whole concept of it, right? We don't have to anymore. People have used one or more of these services, WebEx, Zoom, they're familiar with it. And there is an expectation that online meetings are a thing. So whilst it might be an edge case where you have to dial out from a Teams room system, and you've got certain rooms that have direct routing in place where a number is assigned or a calling plan assigned, that should be your edge case, because the type of space that you're going to build out is not such that people are going to dial into the meeting remotely and just be the random voice speaking from the middle of the room, as I've been many times. They should be part of the meeting. So if you imagine the new sort of layout that you should be aiming for, where rather than the bowling alley, we're looking at going side to side. In the room I'm in at the moment, it is exactly that, right? So it was the bowling alley. We're leaving this room soon. I'll plug this back. Bad idea to move my camera halfway through the presentation, but the landscape effect where you've got the screens on the wall effectively behind me or in front of me, that's the sort of newer way forward, because then that gives us that view of everybody equally. Those features that Microsoft are building in to be able to detect people in meetings, they require a lot of clever horsepower. So testing out doing similar stuff, requires extra chips. That's why there's extra cameras that are coming out. But fundamentally, they need to be able to get a good picture of the person there. So meeting rooms have to change to be able to work in a better way. When you're in a meeting and half of the people, maybe the people leading it, are also remote, then being that lone voice that can't see the content, can't see the people, isn't a great experience. So that shouldn't be the thing you're aiming for. So whilst you might enable Teams voice for some of these, you will not be taking anything to the next level if that's going to be your core scenario. So if you're thinking about meetings, audio conferencing and such, then think about what the bigger experience is going to be. But finally, and I'll leave you with this, one of the things that you can do if you're using Operator Connect, using direct routing and so on, is bringing your own conferencing. So audio conferencing has been dropping into other SKUs as well. Dial out for meetings, again, part of the suite itself. Certain features have dropped into E3 to make it easier for people to join the meeting from anywhere. But if you do need this, then there's new options out there. I'm not sure whether it's supposed to be BYOO, BYOO, bring your own operator, but Operator Connect conferencing is one of those core foundations really that way. It's got the mobile, it's got the calling, but also conferencing became a part of that offering as well, to effectively say, right, well, I've got my existing conferencing numbers, gonna want to port them across, and that gives you that solution rather than provisioning new service numbers inside Microsoft 365. And that is our meeting rooms and devices and voice stuff. So thank you. I'm going to be around for any questions for a little bit, along with Jason as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Make sure you fill in the feedback, because that's how we get reviews on obviously what we've done and how we propose and where we've provided information on. So if you have any questions and comments, by all means, please do so. If you have the ability to do so, please feedback on the teamsnation.rocks/feedback and give us a good review. Thank you. And if you've got a question, go ahead and field it now, as and when you need to.
Yeah, thanks guys. It was a great session. I felt the disturbance in the force at the beginning when you showed the cables and everything. Brought me back to the crimping tool and everything like that. But I think we're stable now. So the features and capabilities you showed were kind of eased up. I think you covered all the questions. See you scheduled some follow-up, so appreciate that. Did you mentioned the RFID QR? That was it. Yeah. Yeah, as far as I can see, you addressed all the questions and you followed up with a couple of people. Either way, utilize the launch. It is a possibility also for further discussions or reach out. Thanks also for the tips as well as the community feedback in that area. So if there are not any questions, that would be all at this time. Fill in the forms, look at the launch, and thank you and see you around.
Cheers, guys. Take care, everyone.
Cheers. Thank you.